welcome to another edition of the Deals for Dentists podcast. And today we're joined by Tom Wright. He's the VP of Sales and Marketing at Orthodent Laboratory, or also called ODL. And you're zooming in from Buffalo, New York. Is that right?
That is correct, Dr. Eric. We are right in Buffalo, New York, kind of close to downtown. We moved probably about 2 years ago now from the suburbs. Buffalo is one of those Rust Belt type of cities. And, there was a lot of just decrepit neighborhoods. So it was funny. We were looking because our lab was growing. And over the past, we knew about 2 years ago we had to move, but further back about 3.5 years ago, we had to move just because our place was, it was like 4,000 square feet, and it's like, it was time. And we were about 15, 20 people. So there was no more room. So we're looking at all these places in the suburbs. They're all very bland type places. Amherst, New York is one of the suburbs, like one of the safest suburbs in America. And they were nice, but it just wasn't very, us. So we knew a developer and we wrote an email to him. He was kind of doing some more development of these old type buildings, like these brick buildings, some really cool stuff. And in New York State, there are a lot of like tax incentives. So he put millions into this thing. Well, actually New York State put millions, and he put some of his own money into it. And we were able to score this really cool place that he put a lot of money into. Interestingly enough, we're going to be moving again though. So we're moving in March to a larger spot. Thankfully, it's right across the street. So we're in 15,000 square feet now. We're going to be migrating over to about 30,000 square feet. And a lot of that transition is because we can't do a lot of stuff in this space because we're actually on the third and fourth floor of this building, which is really uncommon for a laboratory. So labs are either in someone's basement, in their garage, or on like a first floor type manufacturing facility. But it was such a cool spot. We thought we could make it work. But after being here for 2 years, it is just, we can't buy certain machinery. So now we want to be able to do that. So that's kind of the plan. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, well, it sounds like business is doing well if you're expanding. So, tell me a little bit about you and your journey and into dentistry and the dental lab world, and tell us about your company.
Totally. Yeah. So myself, went to school for philosophy. So nothing to do with dentistry, but really good for business, I think, as far as, knowing how people think and what they do. And that was my first kind of venture, into management was here. Before that, I was in the restaurant industry. But my dad, he had owned this business since 1984. And then both my uncles, they were orthodontists. My grandfather, Dr. Larry Wright, he was an orthodontist. And then his grandfather was an orthodontist. So that's my great-great-grandfather, Dr. Frank Casto. And Dr. Casto, I actually have his diploma still from 1901. He went to the Angle School of Orthodontics. So he's one of the first more modern orthodontists. And Dr. Frank, he wrote a lot of papers doing a lot of that. And we only discovered some of this stuff in the past 5 years. And we were looking back and telling my dad, like, man, where was all this stuff? This is amazing. Like, not even knowing this rich history, of our family. I knew my granddad, obviously, but like his granddad, I knew he was an orthodontist, but I didn't know he had the first AAO meeting, one of the first AAO meetings in his living room. And after that, he had a bunch of the ADA meetings at his house, and he was the president of the ADA for a while. So you can see his bust at Case Western. It's like this copper brass, bust. And so he was a rough around the edges type guy, Dr. Frank Casto, but he was really into innovating. At the time, we really like the 40s and the 50s. And then my grandfather came in. He was really into like cleft palates. And, he worked a lot with the children's hospital around here. So they have a wing there. It's like the Dr. Larry Wright cleft palate wing. So that was really huge when they did that, when they rebuilt the children's hospital. And then my dad came into play because he was actually an auto mechanic, and he was really good with his hands. But he didn't get in like his brothers, going into school and he went to school, but to be an auto mechanic. But it was not the best, there weren't the best people in that industry, during the early 80s. So him having a bunch of kids, I have 7 brothers and sisters. He really wanted to get out of that type of lifestyle. It was like a Mac Tools truck that he was driving around. And so his dad invited him in. He said, "Hey, why don't you just, make some appliances for me?" He had a little lab in his basement at his ortho clinic. And my dad started learning all about it. He went to the local ECC, the local community college. They have an ortho dental program, learned as much as he could. And then he just started working and growing the business. And he really kept it, in the 90s, things started to really do much better. And he kept it around, 15 people. And then my brother, him and I have a 10-year difference. He really started to get into it and doing more of the management. But he would get in and out of it because in the meantime, towards the early 2000s, they started a software called EasyRx. And EasyRx was a way, we were so annoyed by all the paper scripts that we were getting from dentists and orthodontists. We couldn't read any of them. And no one would get on board with it. It's like you're trying to start something and everyone's just like, "No, I won't do it," except for people who I think felt bad for us. And so they started doing it, and now it's they ended up selling the business. Maybe it's like 5 years ago now to a guy named Todd Blankenbecker, and he was a big Dolphin guy over at the practice management software there, and so we use it like a ton. That was a huge aspect of everything we did, EasyRx, but now that's not part of what we do. And it allowed us to really focus on the lab. And I think that was almost like a distraction at the time, but a much needed distraction because there was a lot of issues with receiving scripts. And so about 3 years ago, my dad, actually about 5 years ago, he had started thinking about, I have to get out somehow, because 20 years ago, he decided he had a real passion. He's a Roman Catholic, and he had a real passion for radio. So he started all these Catholic radio stations across the entire Northeast. So that was like his big thing. And he was doing both because he never took a salary from the radio station because it was a non-for-profit. So he decided, I gotta do something because I'm focusing on this. So my brother Mike got into it, really started managing, but really only until like that 5 year ago point did we really start to fully take over and manage. And then 3 years ago, we made it official. We actually bought the business from him. So we got to pay that off. But the business has grown exponentially in that time just because he knew it. He knew, like, I just need to let go completely. Otherwise, it's not going to be able to do what it needs to do. So it's me, my brother, my brother-in-law. And at first we were doing things that we had no idea we knew we should be doing, and all these different things. And now we finally have a management team in place. We have a leadership team in place. Like at first I was doing HR. That's not, I was listening to a little bit of the show you had previously. You guys were talking about HR, and like my position is not, I shouldn't be doing HR. So, cause I don't know it, but when you first start, it's almost like a startup. You don't know what to do. So more of the sales and marketing is really more up my alley. And so that's what I'm doing a lot, trying to build the business. We're now up to almost 45 people, employees, and growing three different product lines. Really, we really have the removable department, which is all your type of retainers, orthodontic retainers, and spring aligners and splints, things like that, functionals, twin blocks. And then you have our aligner and invisible retainer division. Those are our vivid aligners, and all of our invisible retainers with those. And then our fixed division, and that's all of our, you know, Hyrax, RPE, rapid palatal expanders, lower lingual holding arches, anything that's just, fixed in the mouth, we're basically doing. So those are really our three main components that we're trying to focus on right now in the business.
Okay, so it's like a family business, really, and it sounds like you're really growing well. You went from 15 to 20 people, and now you're at about 45 people, and you're moving into a 30,000 square foot building. That's a lot of growth. So you specialize in orthodontics. What was it that made this business grow? How did you do it? What was your secret sauce?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of factors going into it. I'll start with like the external factors. Like the hearing aid industry is a really good example. Like 10, or maybe it was like 15 years ago, 20 years ago, they were at like 5,000 labs, and they completely consolidated, because there was just some things that happened in that industry, a lot of retirement, just a lot of consolidation. And it's not like DSOs, but there's a similar factor there. So with here, I think it was twofold. My dad's generation, he's really part of like the baby boomer generation. They were getting into, like their 60s, mid 60s, and they either had to sell it, okay, which is really hard to do for like a lab, unless you have, if you have like 5 people, it's very hard to sell, because once you're done, the doctors are going to call someone up. So it's really just the book of business that they're looking for. And then you have the technology side. So 3D printing, that was something that my dad I'm thankful to him for this, that he was willing to spend the money so that we could get 3D printers about 10 years ago when they first started coming out, and compete in that way, because there was the early adopters, the orthodontists who were starting, and the dentists too, who were starting to get scanners, and they were sending them, and they wanted to be able to send it to a digital lab. And only until the past 2-3 years are people, they all have the, the Invisalign iTero scanner, or the 3Shape Trio scanner. And then from dentists, there's the Sirona, there's the Medit, there's all these different the Plan Mecca. And so now we're getting a lot of calls from dentists. Hey, do you accept scans? Thankfully, we can. Through EasyRx, we get all the scans, and then through our 3D printers, we can print all of them out. So that's a huge roadblock to answer like some of the growth to many labs, and why they're closing, because they don't want to spend that. And a lot of them, yeah, like it might be like 3 people, and it's like, I'm not going to invest in that. Like I'm ready to retire. So the consolidation with the labs is huge. And then sadly, the last part, which I'm not like a huge fan of, obviously no one is, with COVID and everything that's happened there. A lot of labs have shut down due to that. Thankfully, a lot of it was people who, from just like industry knowledge, who were going to be retiring anyways. They just decided now is the time. I'm not going to wait a year or two. It's too crazy. So
was 3D printing and maybe also the EasyRx, were those the game changers?
I'd say those were the game changers. Doing a lot of digital marketing as opposed to trade shows. A lot of our competitors were, and they're big. People know who they like. Like Great Lakes Orthodontics and big guys like that. Like they're really going to, and we go to trade shows as well. But I think we started in that digital marketing with our new website about 6 years ago, and just felt like, with Google SEO and, the new website, ads, wherever we can, try and get them. That's helped a lot. So I would say, yeah, the new technology with the 3D printing, and just be able to digitally market, our brand.
You definitely looks like you have a brand. Like your office or lab is like, it's colorful. It's like this nice wide open space. Your video is really slick and hip. the website as well. So was that all kind of factored in together that this is going to be our brand? And instead of sitting, at that trade show for 3 days and trying to talk to every dentist that walks by, we're going to focus more on website, video, and the digital side of things.
Yeah. It's such a niche that it was like, I mean, I don't mind being denied, like constantly by dentists walking by and orthodontists walking by, but it's definitely not as fun as being able to just, let's put the dollars here and let's create a solution for people, and sort of like that, like that brand, that special brand. And that was all part of the colors, why we moved to this place. Everything from, like we were talking about the video, like that's part of the brand. Like it has to be all inclusive. Otherwise, people think that like I said, most labs their branding is blue and white, and they're in a basement, and nothing's necessarily wrong with that. But the issue is these are like medical devices going into someone's mouth. And so when we started getting serious, we got our FDA clearance, like for our aligners, to be able to say, like, it's not a badge of like, hey, you did it. It's just a clearance. It means you're cleared to do this. But it was really expensive, but it was worth it because we knew that, it's just one of those regulatory things that should be done. And the lab industry is going to be a lot more regulated in the next 10 to 15 years, especially with places like Smile Direct Club and all these DIY aligner type things going on. And I'm not for like massive regulation, but I think that when there's such under regulation, like in this industry, because they're never going to question like the dentists and the orthodontists, because that's how the FDA looks at it. Like they have the degrees, like they know what they're talking about. But the labs making the products, like I don't have a dental degree, so we should be, and it's going to only elevate the product for, our providers, clinicians.
So that's an FDA 510K. Can you explain what that is? Is that FDA for your facility or for your materials?
It's for everything related to our clear aligners. So the FDA, it's a class 2 medical device, aligners are, and all other, orthodontic appliances, except for like sleep appliances, like you have to get your FDA clearance for sleep appliances. But what people do is they call them like splints with, they change the names. But yeah, it's just for clear aligners. But in turn, you do have to make sure that you have like a quality management system in place with everything going around like in the entire lab. So if I get a FDA clearance for my clear aligners, I still need to make sure that my retainers and my fixed appliances are following a certain standard to this quality management system, which is great for dentists because they know that like there's certain procedures being followed when we made this, like the materials. We had to do extensive testing on the materials for our aligners, that they're safe, biocompatible. They're not going to hurt you, when you put them in your mouth. That the 3D printing, that the 3D printers that we actually use translate the scan that's being sent to us, because that was our biggest hurdle over the past 5 years was 3D printing. It was so terrible. So we had some 3D printers, and I won't say the name of who they were, but we had a lot of them. And what we were getting on the scans was not accurate with what was actually printing out. And so we had a 40% fail rate in our 3D prints. So the 3D printers were like economically priced, and that's what a lot of people are getting, these desktop printers, because they're cheap, between $3,000 and $10,000. At least for a 3D printer, that's very cheap. And so we finally just bit the bullet, and we said, we're done with this. Like it's not worth the cheapness of the printer to have a 40% fail rate, and on top of that, a downtime that is huge. So we went all carbon, and Carbon 3D, they are just, astounding with what they're able to provide consistency wise. And they also have like tons of sensors within these printers so that if the printer does go down, which it never does, but if it does, they know it right away, and they can be printing on their printers and send you the prints like overnight. So these are the guys who've done like those Adidas like soles, they print like the inside custom Riddell NFL helmets. So they do a lot of that stuff, and their biggest market is dental because it's just huge. But they're doing a lot of innovative things, and their machines are expensive, and it's a lease program, which stinks even more because you have to pay for it every year. But the cool thing about that is that when you are done with it, they'll upgrade you to the next type of printer. So
what is a carbon 3D printer? Can you explain that?
yeah, it's just a more industrial type printer. It's a digital light synthesis type printer. So what it has is it's a projector underneath the print like tray that's shooting that image onto the print tray. And then they have this special technology where like, I don't really even know because it's like proprietary, but it's like this layer of oxygen so that you have this consistency as the print is rising. And it's really just like an industrial type printer that you can run 24/7 and it doesn't fail. And we love it. And a lot of these desktop, I don't know if you've heard of like Formlabs and those like smaller type, those are pretty good. Like Formlabs, I like Formlabs. The only issue with Formlabs is they take a long time to print. So for like a lab setting, that can affect your turnaround time to tell like your doctor, hey, our turnaround time's like 10 days as opposed to 8 because I have to wait 8 hours for my print to be done. Right. So if you're doing stuff in office, which a lot of orthos and dentists are now, it's not that bad. But if you're outsourcing to a lab, you definitely want to outsource to one with, a more reliable printer.
How quickly does yours print with the industrial carbon 3D printer?
Depends what you're printing. So if you're printing like something like a little model here, that would be about a half print. If it's a full model, you're looking at about an hour to an hour and 20 minutes. So
how many can you
that are faster, but so we can print between 8 and 12 models per printer. And so we have 4 of these carbon printers right now. We're looking to maybe update to their bigger printer, which is like you would give back the other printers and you'd get a bigger one. And then that can print like 60 to 70 at a time. So it's more efficient than having to clean it each time.
What does one of these bad boys go for?
So they're the smaller ones are $50,000 a year for a lease of these, but you do get a much cheaper resin price because of it. So like what you're going to pay with Formlabs and all these other, it's pretty expensive. But for carbon, they're seeing, like, hey, we're charging a high lease rate, but our resin is much lower. And that's where they make most of their money anyways, is the resin. It's like any type of printer, inkjet printers, they make it all in the ink. So the same deal with 3D printing. It's all the resin costs. So if we can get that lower, that's the way to go. And the big one, which is, it would offset, but the big one's like $250,000 for a lease. So that's why companies like Riddell and Adidas, they're using it. They can clearly afford that. And they have a ton of them actually. So
I could see, you needed to, upgrade your facility size and be on the first floor if you're getting one of those huge printers in there. Now, so is carbon the name of the printer, or is that like the style of the printer? Is that
that's the name of the printer. That's the name of the company. Okay. Yeah. They're in they're outside of San Francisco. So in Silicon Valley. And Joe DeSimone, he was the CEO, and he did like a really famous like TED Talk. If you just type in like 3D printing TED Talk, and he came out, it was like a brand new way. He was the first person to like actually print things super fast. So before that, like when we first started, we were using like the Stratus printers. They're object printers, and they have, it's like a layer type printer. So it just prints layer and then it cures and then layer and cures. And those were taking 14 hours for about 10 to 12 models. And so I would put prints on in the evening and just come back the next day.
Yeah.
And that's how it would be. And you'd have to clean them all off and everything, like with a hose, because they have like the support material on them. But it's come such a long way, that so much better than it used to be.
So what's your, you were having 40% fail rate. What's your fail rate now?
Probably less than 1%.
Wow.
So,
and that's
yeah.
because of the carbon technology that they're using.
Exactly.
So, I mean, like in a dental office, I'm sure it's the same as a lab, redos are a killer. It's time, energy. If I have to redo a crown on a patient, then that's negative money, time I'm wasting, and it doesn't look good, to the patient. So redos are such a killer. It's got to be the same in a lab. I mean, every minute of our time is valuable, and if you're redoing something, it's such negative work.
Totally. Yeah. Redos. That's why we started like our lean manufacturing journey about 2 years ago. And, we haven't looked back. We actually brought in a VP of ops he was actually at Steelcase, the big furniture manufacturer, for years. And they were all about lean manufacturing. And lean manufacturing is just basically the densest way to put it. It's about fixing what bugs you. But you go through like these different wastes. There's the 8 wastes, and it's super useful regardless whether you're a lab, whether you're an office worker, if you're in a clinic. It doesn't really matter. You can utilize lean. And lean was really about seeing all the small things and how can we just save 2 seconds off of everything. So I can't, find my pen ever. So I'm going to put something like a pen holder on my desk and stick it there, so I'm never looking for my pen again. And when you utilize that into like the laboratory or the office, things become so much more efficient. But one of the 8 wastes is like defects. And so when you have that type of mentality, you're getting rid of defects, you're focusing on it. You have all these different data points that you're looking at to try to get rid of defects. You're like, wow, I didn't know that we were sending out that many defects before. It's like really bad. Then business just starts to really skyrocket too, because you have so many less complaints. But I can see, like, we've imagined it like, hey, what would this look like lean, like in a clinic for like a dentist? And I feel like it could totally be done. Like just the efficiency of like wait times. I've been in some dentist office where like I sit down, I fill out the paperwork, I'm in the chair. And I've been in some where I'm waiting like 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And there's clearly some organizational structure going on there that's different. And clearly the one's better than the other.
I just wanted to go back to what you said about lean. Was the Easy RX, was that a big solution to a pain point where it just made things a lot more efficient? Because I mean, you should see my partner's handwriting. It's like, it's like another language. I can imagine you getting all these scripts and you can't understand, you can't read it, and then you got to call the doctor. And it's just, it's so inefficient. Similarly in our office, I mean, old school, the front desk would come back to my back office with a Post-it, leave a Post-it on my desk, and then they'd go back to the front. Now we have this intra-office communication where they can just ding me. We use Weave, and it's just little things like that every minute counts. So was that a big lean component, was getting a software like that involved?
Yeah, that was huge. That was our first lean component before we even knew what lean was. It was just more of like innate, like this is really annoying us. And we still when we onboard a doctor, we now have to train them. Like we'll do an hour team viewer session with them to help them understand the software, because we don't want to like leave them hanging. So we've had it was before where you'd have like a stack, maybe from one office, 10, 15 cases. And this is, true story, where we can't read the script, but then we call the office and they don't even know who the patient is. And so these cases are just sitting there and no one knows who it's for. And it just becomes a disaster. So then convincing them, hey, it's going to take you 3 seconds longer. Just type out the name, on the form, and then you're going to have it there forever because it saves all your scans. It saves your prescription. We don't have to photocopy your prescription for data. If we have to look back 7 years from now at what, John Doe had. So that was huge. That was really huge for us.
So tell me about Vivid Aligners, because on Deals for Dentists, you have a promo offer of get your first case for 50% off, which is a $300 value. What is Vivid Aligners? Is that your own personal clear aligner material?
That's correct. So it's not our clear aligner material. It's our aligner though, like our brand. So yeah, we just, it's your typical aligner. Aligners are becoming more of like a commodity, like you can find them pretty much everywhere if you want, but we've been doing aligners for about 10 years and we really got into them because my uncle, being an orthodontist, he was actually one of the top 1% Invisalign providers in Western New York. And so we were able to learn a lot from him. And he still trains us to this day on the setup, because when I think about aligners and when I think about Vivid and any other aligner company, we're really just a plastic company, a company that provides a solution to move teeth. But the artist is the clinician, it's the dentist, it's the ortho. And as we started to do this more and more, we realized, it's not just orthos who can do this. It's dentists who can do this as well, because it's not that difficult to do simple cases, 5 to 15 aligners. And it's a great revenue stream for dentists to do it. But the hard part is with something like Invisalign, you have to do such a volume to become like that top 1%. So you see like the dentists who are, and like they really grow that. But let's say you just want to have an extra stream and you want to be doing that. We have one dentist client. He's not an orthodontist. He does a lot of these, at least, 10 to 15 cases, a month. And most of his cases are, between 10 and 20 aligners, on the upper and the lower. And I think his greatest success was learning how to sell it to his current patients. He's just really good at that. He'll have them in the chair and he'll be like, maybe we could just tweak this. Are you interested in that? I have a much more economical option for you. Now the dentists, they market it like that. We don't market it based on our price, even though our price is much less than Invisalign. I don't like that aspect because it can make the product seem cheaper, even though the material we're using is high quality. So our 510K allowed us to utilize what is called Zendura Flex. And it's as good, if not better, than Smart Track material. That's the Invisalign type material. And what Zendura Flex allows is it has 3 different layers in this material here. So I'll try and focus in here on that if I can. Mm-hmm. So you have this these 3 different layers, and you can really go all the way around, and it can go right back to normal without any type of, and the forces that it's able to withstand are really good. So they called it Flex because it's really comfortable. It's not like your typical Essex material that everyone calls it Essex, but the actual brand, like Essex, see, it's much more rigid. It's nice. It's nice for retainers. But what happens is you get these little micro fractures, in the embrasures, and it's just not really great for moving teeth. Now they have materials that do that, but we've stuck with Zendura just because they were actually the first provider. They were the first provider for Invisalign, and then Invisalign smartly started developing their own material because they make a lot more money probably doing that. But these guys have kept developing ever since then. And so their typical material is Zendura A. That's what we make all of our retainers. That is a little bit more rigid. But our aligners, we make all with Zendura Flex. And you can now do cases that may have been, 20, 25, 30 aligners in the past. You can shrink that down to 15 aligners. And so the way Vivid really works is you would utilize like our EasyRx platform. You would submit either your scan or you would send us your plaster models. And then someone would reach out to you, of course, to onboard you. And then we would teach you how EasyRx works. You then receive if you'd like a consultation of like, hey, we think this evaluation, it's going to be between 10 and 15 aligners. Okay, that's not super accurate, but at least it gives the dentist an idea, like this is not 50 aligners. So what do I charge a patient? That's the biggest question. What do I charge? And the answer to that question is 2.5 times to 3 times what the lab bill is going to be. So, what my uncle had always said is just, stick to a certain amount that you're going to offer patients. Maybe it's between that 5 and 15 aligner range, maybe 20 at the tops. Know what the range is, like the cost of the lab is, and just charge it anyways, whether it's 5, whether it's 15. Don't always base it off of, hey, they're only doing 5, so I'm only going to charge this. Just have that base amount that you're always charging. It won't matter. No one's really going to know. You're not doing anything to the patient. That's just your aligner cost because they're getting such a discount from Invisalign anyways. So I know a lot of dentists who they really do well with it. If they don't want to do a lot of, like crowns or, different appliances like that, like they'll go into the aligner space and it does them well. So once they get all set up with Vivid, we'll send you a notification to your email that will have the setup. It'll show you all the aligners. And then you can click play, and then it shows you 1 through however many. You approve it. You either say yes or you say no. If you say no, then you tell us why, what you want tweaked or adjusted. Once you've tweaked or adjusted it, then you get the approval. We'll do that. We print them out, the models on our carbons. We thermoform them, trim them out, and we send them out to you. And we utilize attachments. We won't use them if you don't like. We utilize IPR, so just like the shaving in between the teeth. But we're very conservative when it comes to that. So we don't want to be like hack jobs, like just like cutting through everyone's teeth to make sure that they move. Like there's special ways to do it without having to trim so much in between the teeth. So that's the sweet spot for Vivid. It really is between that 5 and 20 aligner range, especially for dentists who aren't super experienced, but they want to get into it. I'd say anyone could get into it at those type increments, pretty easily.
So like a mild to moderate type of situation, like your typical adult with lower anterior crowding. Personally, I have absolutely zero experience with orthodontics. It was a total joke. I went to Nova and graduated in 2002, and it was almost like I didn't have any orthodontic experience at all. The only thing I knew how to do was refer. They just did not teach us much at all. We didn't place any brackets, any bands. It was just like ortho was like a total secret there. And they just wanted to have the ortho residents do everything. So for someone like me, this is something totally new. Do you have training? Do you have education? Are there videos? Do you have mentors I can talk to? What do you offer?
Definitely mentors. So what we'll do is if you want more like training on how, like what is the best, like how is my case going to work? What do I do? We will actually have a write-up. So like a treatment plan set up that will come back to you. So like it's not hard. The treatment plan is basically just the directions of this is why we're doing and what we're doing. And that is reviewed by an orthodontist himself. Now I do know other services, and this is not a plug for them. It's just because we know them, and I think it's actually an interesting service. It's called OrthoBrain. It's a Dr. Dan Gurman, And what he does is he charges a fee to dentists to do all of their ortho treatment planning. So we know dentists now who are doing orthodontics, but not just doing it. Like it goes through this OrthoBrain portal, and then they do all the treatment planning, and then you're basically treating, patients with orthodontics through an orthodontist and being able to collect that type of revenue, which is really interesting. And I think he's really blowing up now. But we have dentists who go through him as well, and submit cases to us. If it's simpler stuff, nothing wrong with submitting stuff right to us. We can help you as well.
Yeah, I would personally, the biggest fear for me is what if it doesn't go, according to plan, and if I'm stuck having to refer the case to my orthodontist next door. That's always my biggest fear. But I guess case selection is so important in the beginning.
Totally.
And to just stick with adults at first, and try not to pick any crazy people when you're starting out, unless you want to have you said have a fixed fee. Then there's the crazy person fee, which is 10 times the amount of the lab. Yeah. So 2 levels: regular fee and crazy person fee. So I really I have no orthodontic experience. I heard though that the patent for Invisalign ran out. Can you explain what happened there and what's going on with that and how that's changed everything?
There's a lot that's happened with that. You could talk for hours on it, but there was so many lawsuits. Basically, Invisalign had a patent on tooth movement software and what you were able to do. Now, a lab was always allowed to suck down or thermoform aligners in a small, way, as long as they're not marketing it. Because if an orthodontist or a dentist writes a prescription that this is what they want, they're allowed to prescribe that to a laboratory. So we were always doing it in a very small capacity, but we weren't marketing it at all because that was part of we couldn't do that we were using tooth movement technology via the computer. So what we used to do is you'd cut the teeth out and then you'd manually move them, you'd dupe it in silicone, and then you'd do that. One case would take us hours. And now it doesn't at all, but that patent is now up, and they've gone to court multiple times against 3Shape and, Smile Direct Club and all these different companies to kind of revamp that, but it's now up, it's open, anyone can move teeth. That's why a lot of doctors, orthos, are moving teeth in their clinics now with software. And what they'll do is if they don't want to print it, they'll send it to someone like us. They've already done the movement, so they know it's going to work, and they'll just send us the models. We'll print out the models, we suck down the plastic and send it back to them. The other cool thing is once people get used to this is people are now sending it direct to patient. That's a huge barrier, because Smile Direct Club's charging so little, $1,800 to $2,400. And so orthos and dentists are how do I compete with that? It's don't see them as much and don't do super comprehensive cases with those, but offer both, because these are people you wouldn't have gotten to begin with. So why not get those people too?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I feel like a lot of those do-it-yourself, they're going to end up back in an orthodontist anyway, because there was no supervision anyway. So I feel ultimately that it's, I know orthodontists that were nervous about it, but I still think that those patients are going to end up back in an orthodontist's office to have them fix the case and do it the way it's supposed to be done. Another thing that would worry me, and it sounds silly because I drill teeth all day, but is the IPR that you were talking about, the shaving down of the teeth with, do you guide us through that and how much to do if we have to do it at all?
You would get an IPR. You'd get an IPR sheet, a direction as to how much IPR you would do and at what point you would do it. And we would reference you to the like actual IPR sheets, or they're like these little strips that you can buy. You can buy them at a lot of different dental vendors. And basically they're just different sizes, 0.02 millimeters, 0.03 and 4, and goes up. But those are the most common, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. And that is the safest way to do it. It's these little strips you just put in between the teeth, and it's already the predetermined, size, and you just shave it as much as you can. And it's not going to shave more because that's how big the actual strip is. Now, when you get a little bit more dangerous / advanced, people are using the like the discs and going in, but that's definitely a little bit more aggressive. I do like the strips, and you would get something backwards. Say at aligner 1, before you even put aligner 1 in, you're going to IPR between the 2 centrals and between the upper laterals 0.2. It's just a common type. There's a lot of crowding, so we need to do that. But then you're going to have the patient back in at aligner 6 or 7, and you're just going to do a little bit because the teeth have now come in and now they're hitting again. So we need a little bit more right here. So maybe another 0.1 millimeters of IPR. And it's a good opportunity to see the patient again and check their progress if they're tracking. So we would say no to anyone and guide people through if they were brand new, and say, hey, this is probably not a good case at that evaluation stage before we even did the setup. Like this is not a good case. Like there's all types of bite issues, like they're class 3 or class 2 or whatever, we would call you up and say, this is not good. You should refer this up. But there are so many cases where it's just a tooth. Like, and you have to be able to see that when you're at the chair, like, hey, this is really simple. Your bite's really good. You just have a little bit of crowding or a little bit of spacing. Let's close that up. It'll take, 10 trays, take 20 weeks and you'll be out.
Yeah. And it's great to set up some cosmetic, if you're doing veneers or crowns, to try to straighten the teeth first and then do the restorations. Now, is there a way with your software where I could show a patient how they could potentially look? Do you have that?
Yeah. So you can't, there's no way to do it. I think dental's a little bit further ahead with this, with like the veneers and kind of like before they even get them, you're able to like show them. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's pretty cool with like some of the 3Shape software. But ours, we would send you a setup, and that wouldn't be until like after you submitted the case to us. And you could potentially email that or text that to the patient, or you could have them come back in and show them what their teeth are going to look like.
Okay.
So
now
that's just a way to do it.
Have you noticed a difference in accuracy when someone sends you a model or a polyvinyl or versus a digital scan?
Yes. Now the PVS impressions are definitely the best for this. You want that because they last. So some people do a really good job taking those, but ideally like the scan is the best way to go. I mean, you're getting the best. We've traded thousands of cases with the PVS impressions and they've been successful. So I'm not to say that those aren't, they are great. But if the scan's just, it's perfect. And if it's not, you can clearly see that it's not right away. You don't have to pour it first with plaster and see, oh no, it's not good. Yeah.
Now, are any scanners that you find work better than others, or are they all pretty much nowadays on a level playing field?
They're getting pretty level. I mean, the iTero Invisalign scanner, while it being the most pricey, it is pretty awesome. But I know that the Korean company Medit, they are really like, there's orthodontists now getting those because it's so much cheaper, but you're getting the same level of quality. iTero will always be more convenient for people because they might be submitting to Invisalign as well. So they want to have that ability to do both. But if you're aligner agnostic and you don't care, and you're not submitting anything to Invisalign, probably the Medit is the way to go from what I've seen. I know we have a few doctors who use the Plan Mecca. That was a little finicky. They weren't they were trying to get us scans and they weren't super happy with it. The most trouble I've had is like the Sirona scanner. People are just confused because you have to call up Sirona and then you have to ask them for permission to download the STL files from them. And sometimes they give permission or sometimes they don't. I don't know. I'm not super privy to like the dental world as much either. But I just know that I had to go through some hoops to get some of the scans from that. Not impossible by any means. We did it, but it was just not as easy.
Yeah, Sirona I've heard is more of a, they're a little more closed than some of the other scanners that are more open. Totally. So, and what's the new facility going to look like? Because your current lab just looks like a super cool place to work. Looks like it's got a nice like coffee machine and lounge, like to entice those young millennials to go work there. What's the new facility going to look like?
Very similar. It's actually the same developer right across the street. So that's pretty cool. It's going to have the brick all along it. It was actually, they had to redo the entire ceiling. So the ceiling's all wood because they had the New York State money to do that. So it's a beautiful new ceiling with all these windows. We're going to get some plant walls up there. Like before we had all these like plants, but we're actually going to have like plants on the walls. Get some graffiti up there. We're going to have a couple murals drawn by some of these local artists who do just a great job. It is a 2-floor type of facility as well, but upstairs is only going to be the offices now. And then the first floor is really just going to be all production. What it's also going to allow for us is there's a huge garage door. So it's also going to allow for us to automate with certain things. So bring in automated machinery, which we couldn't do before. Like the carbon machine, I can't bring it up the elevator. It's huge. So this will allow us to do that.
What's your training process?
We'll take a video of it though.
Oh yeah, you gotta have a video. I mean your video for your facility now is super cool. I want to work there. It looks so cool.
Hey,
what's your training process like? If someone wants to be an orthodontic tech, they have some experience or they don't. What's your training process like for your employees?
That's been evolving over the years to become more refined. So it takes so long to like learn how to bend wire on like something like, like these types of appliances. It just takes forever. And so you'd come in, you have an extensive screening process and, through HR, making sure that first and foremost, they are I know it's a keyword these days, but a culture fit, make sure that like they want to work and they're not miserable and they're not going to be toxic. Like that's number one. I don't want a toxic person. What's the point of going to work if you're going to make me miserable all day?
Right.
And so that's first and foremost. Then once they come in, you would have a trainer and they would work with these employees for at least 3 months before they're fully on their own, fabricating these appliances. Some of these procedures much quicker because we do a lot of specialty work. That is, some of these you're not a real expert for 2 to 3 years. It's like if you're, a classic, denture, you're making dentures, like that's like an art. But now with all the 3D printed dentures and stuff, it's changing. So it's the same exact thing in ortho. There are some things where you're able to come in and do it after a week, and some things that take years. And that's really just you take an expert in the department, and then they are their mentor throughout, the next months of making sure they just repeat it until they can do it.
Yeah, just do it over and over again.
Yeah,
well, that's great. It sounds like you guys are, you're doing well. You guys sounds like you got it all together over there. So Tom Wright, VP of Sales and Marketing at ODL, Vivid Aligners. You can go to Deals for Dentists to find their promo offer. Get your first aligner case 50% off, which is up to a $300 value. Tom, thanks so much. And is there any last words of wisdom, any nuggets you want to tell out there for those young dentists that are interested in learning about clear aligners?
Yeah, totally. Thanks for having me, Dr. Block. Just don't be afraid to innovate, to do new things, especially with clear aligners. It's not as hard as you think, especially these small cases. It's pretty straightforward and simple. And we'd love to, get a call from you and we can walk you through the whole process from step one to the last step. And then, form a great relationship.
Awesome. Tom, thanks so much.
Hey, thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Have a good one.
All right. I'll be in touch. Take care.
All right. Sounds good. You too. Bye-bye.